movie, unified here in cyberspace from the Chicago region and the Utah, the land of the Utes. So we're going to be reviewing a great movie that came out, God, quite a few years ago. I think it was 1998, 1999. Groundhog Day, which is filled with all sorts of insights from Course in Miracles, and is one of those movies that you will often hear people reference who are into most of the schools of metaphysics, whether it's divine science, Course in Miracles, Christian Science. I have a Christian Science friend who absolutely swears that that's what we're all experiencing, is that Groundhog Day is just a literal translation of life on this planet. So anyway, I've got Barret here with me this morning up in northern Chicago region, and Devin, who is out in the deserts and the mountains of Utah.
Hello, how's it going?
So, who wants to start off Groundhog Day? Because it's a great movie.
Sorry, I'll take that. I'll take it right off. How long do you guys think he was stuck on Groundhog's Day?
Oh, I'm gonna say at least 1,000 days, maybe 5,000 days. I don't know.
What is that in years?
Well, I'm gonna say like 20 years. How about 20 years?
20 years, good.
Okay. Well, my thought was just simply a year, because it seemed like he was repeating history over and over again on multiple occasions that were not part of the actual movie. But I think that he kind of, in the course of a year, became quite intimate with everybody in Puxtatawny.
Yeah, but guys, it was only a day. What are you talking about?
No, it was the same day, but it was the same day in the illusion of time. Yeah. It was stretched out over months and perhaps years. Who knows? Maybe even centuries.
So they first thought they were going to have him stuck in there for 10,000 years, which is crazy. That's what they anticipated. But according to the count of how many edits and the actual study of what it was and everything, he was in there for 8 years, 8 months, and 16 days.
Oh.
Yeah,
that's astonishing. How do you put that kind of container on it? That's what fascinates me, because you'd have to be very privy to a lot of the inside stuff that was going on as they were creating it.
Yeah, I know. Like, he ran around saying how he knows everybody, and this person's this, and she did that, and she came from here, and this, and it doesn't really say how, all that time. But I don't know exactly. I didn't count it. I just Google searched it. I guess the directors thought he was like in there for 10 years, but they actually planned on 10,000 years. And according to the website Wolf Guards, which ran the numbers, Phil was actually trapped for 8 years, 8 months, and 16 days. That's all I got for you. I just thought that was awesome. I guessed a year as well. I was like, at least a year, maybe up to 5 years, but yeah, that's pretty cool. Anyway.
Well, if someone says something is true on the internet, it must be so. So I accept that as 100% true.
That's been good.
So, really, the movie has a fantastic plot. It starts off with Bill Murray playing a role that he's brilliant in, because later on he went on to make
Scrooge. Yeah.
Scrooged, and Scrooged is kind of Groundhog Day on steroids. But the whole idea is a transformation that occurs in a person's life experience and consciousness when they discover love. and when they can step outside themselves, outside their personality, their ego, their obsessions, their diminishing ideas about other people. And that really is the core of the plot, is an awakening that goes on a multitude of different levels. And that's why it takes 8 years for the process to unfold, is because every day another layer seems to be stripped off as to Phil's ego and his true needs and true desires.
Yeah, and if you've watched this far and you haven't seen the movie yet, then spoiler alert, basically the plot of the movie is that Bill Murray lives February 2nd over and over and over again until basically, he learns what he needs to learn. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful evolution of the soul's journey, right? How we all have to kind of see and learn the things that we have to see and learn in order for us to move on to the next step, right? So for a lot of us, it could be a relationship issue, or it could be, an issue about how to learn more kindness and compassion to ourselves. In this movie, Bill Murray's character learns both of those things and a whole lot more. But it's a beautiful evolution of how we have to kind of like look sometimes directly kind of into the darkness within ourselves in order to move through it and move beyond. And yeah, obviously, since Bill Murray's in it, it does all that in a pretty humorous way. That again, it makes it one of my favorite movies. I think it actually probably is the movie I've seen more than any other movie. I don't tend to rewatch movies a whole lot, but I've seen that one probably 7 or 8 times now, and it just gets better and better.
You're stuck on Groundhog's Day. Huh?
I know. I just keep hitting play every day. It's like my own version of it.
Well, I find it interesting that as the plot advances, we start off with the first cycle of repetition, and then the next day he wakes up and is, oh my God, and the third day, and then all of a sudden he goes through this cycle of really falling into despair. And so that's when we hit that process of him trying to kill himself over and over and over again. And of course, one of the more exciting scenes is when he kidnaps Phil, the groundhog, and takes him to a local, what do you call it? Quarry, yes. And magnificently drives off a ledge, and the truck crashes and burns and explodes, and but the next morning he wakes up and he's still alive. And that really is what is going on with us over and over again. We get to the end of our rope, and then look for a place to throw ourselves off a bridge or drive into blazing glory of some sort, and yet we keep waking up over and over again.
Yeah, and the Course actually does speak to this, to this topic of suicide, when it says, that this world is not left by death, but by life. So it's not through the body ending that we actually leave this world. It's only ever through healing all of our unconscious guilt over the idea that we're separated from God. And so I think this movie is like you said, the perfect demonstration of that. Like, he's trying to get out of the cycle in this point of despair where he starts taking his own life in all these different ways, but it doesn't actually break him free, right? He's not free from his suffering. The suffering stays until he actually goes deeper within and starts to address some of the pain. And then all of a sudden he can move into more peace and more happiness. So that is a really beautiful message, I think, in the movie, illustrated so cool and in such a beautiful way.
Like, to go on the same lines in which you guys are offering, I've noticed this time watching it that it actually, his evolution, spiritual evolution of it, goes through the frequencies. I don't know if you know much about the 7 frequencies, mostly referred to as the chakras. And we actually go through this evolutionary process all the time, and especially of like on day-to-day basis. We're changing through frequencies, and it's our consciousness perceiving our soul experience and the movement of it. So it starts off, his first few times are about survival, trying to figure out, what's going on, trying to figure out what his world's happening, and he's getting rather frustrated with it and surprised and everything. And then when he started to accept that, realize that he's there, he starts moving into a way of pleasure. He starts talking to women, and he uses it to swoo them and everything. And as he got that one woman, caught that one, whatever. Anyway, and then it moves into confidence. When he's a little tired of that, he started moving into confidence when he decided to rob the bank, and he uses it to establish the relationship and help that relationship. And then he got tired of that a little bit, and he moved into then starting to find love and trying to find love. And he started kind of the wrong approach of trying to deal with this woman. I've just watched it and I forget her name already, but the main woman in the show. And then he's like just lying pretty much about everything, trying to, this goes into the next one, he's lying about everything, trying to win her over. And then when that didn't work, he's now trying to get out, and that's when he starts trying to transcend or kill himself. And at the same time, finally, as it gets a little longer, he tries to kill himself over and over again. Then it goes into, he starts losing the attachment of trying to get out, and then he's finally starts accepting it, really realizing that it's happening, and starts transcending in the sense of what he once was as a person, and started now learning new things and expanding and reaching out in relationships that, it's funny at the end of the movie when everybody knows him, and that's all in the one day for them. All of them met him in that one day, and he's been around like almost being this empowered superhuman being that is so much in the flow of it that he's going around touching everybody in the town's lives in one day. Even though he knows it by heart, of course, it's been 8 years for him or something, but just to see that happen and everybody, it stands out. And just think about Jesus being in the flow like that. He knows the whole script. He knows what's happening. He's just going around touching everybody. They're like, oh, it's that guy. Well, it's pretty amazing. But
Yeah.
so you can see that the evolution went through those frequencies as well. I was surprised that it worked so well. I was like, oh, look at it lining up. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really does have an element of inspiration in the midst of it. And the lady that is his producer, Andy McDowell, is you watch her go through some parallel evolutionary steps herself, where she's more in contact with her own emotional range. And then the cameraman guy, Chris Elliott. I mean, Chris Elliott's been he pops up in a lot of really great movies. And one of my favorites with him is The Abyss, where he's, a major player in what's going on with these people at the bottom of the ocean. But you can see him go through kind of a de-evolutionary process, where it starts off with him appearing to be, the cool hipster inside joke kind of smirkish guy. And then his role diminishes to the point where he gets purchased at an auction for 25 cents by somebody who's probably in their 70s or 80s. So it's kind of fun watching how all the different characters are not left out at all. They are going through their own personal stages of awakening, or falling asleep, as in the case of Chris Elliott. But overall, I think the movie really does give us a lot of insights and a lot of ideas about what it is that our life really is looking like from an exterior position. If we can get outside ourselves long enough, I'm sure that we can find multiple occasions where you're able to relate to the movie, saying, "Oh, I remember doing that."
Yeah, and I think one of the cool kind of inflection points in the movie happens pretty early on. Like you're saying, the first few days he's just kind of stunned, and he keeps having the same problem. You know, obviously this is probably most clearly embodied by the puddle of slush that he steps into. You know, and he steps into it the next day, and he steps into it a third time. But then the fourth day, he's about to step into the puddle of slush, and then he stops, and then he steps over it, and of course somebody else steps into the puddle of slush right after that. But it really is this sort of the first shift. You know, I think, like you're saying, kind of going from that survival energy up into, you know, thinking, okay, I have some power here. You know, I can make some choices. And I think it's that ability to choose how we're going through our life that really can start to affect what is actually happening in our life. But it's not till later in the movie that he gets, it's not even about that. It's not about having a great day. It's sort of like what you're saying, like being in the flow. It's being in this state of mind or this state of being that is loving and kind, and that becomes his purpose, and that becomes what this whole experience for him was about. The reason the day kept repeating over and over again is to help him have this shift. And you know, again, from people looking outside, not experiencing all the days that he did, it would look like he was kind of a jerk and kind of a bully and a meanie. And then all of a sudden, a different him shows up, right, on February 2nd, where he's gone through all these 8+ years of experiences and growth and healing, and all of a sudden there's like who is this guy that just showed up, and he's multi-layered, and, you know, learned French, and, you know, how to throw playing cards into a hat and all that. So but yeah, I mean, each of us can have this sort of shift. Obviously, this movie is sort of bending time to express this in an interesting way. But in our daily life, we can have the same dynamic unfolding, and I think that's the beautiful message that this sort of underlies the whole story.
It reminds me, when you're talking about that, brings up Waking Life. That's another movie that's really trippy. I don't know if you ever heard it, but that one scene, the one scene about pinball machine, at the pinball machine, I guess. Anyway, the one kid starts talking about his dream, and then how it's just repeating over and over. And the theory is that life is still this whole repeated thing. Anyway, we should watch that one as well. That's really, really cool that we're just in this day, you know, just going through the same story. It's really just repeating the same type of experience over and over again, and we're just perceiving it a little differently and doing it a little differently, and taking it with different perspectives and different angles, and what are we going to do with it now, and how is it going to look like with this variable, you know, technology. Now it's a whole different scenario than it was before, and it feels like it's really just the same. You know, here you are, you're the symbol of Jesus in your life, and you have your 12 apostles of specific people you're dealing with in your life, and you can see that it's almost the same repeated story since the first initial 12 rays of the beginning of all existence, and you kind of can relate it to your life even here. I haven't tried to look in Groundhog's Day, but I bet there's a kind of a reflection of the 12 and everything in that story as well, but I got to look at it. I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah. The thing that I kind of got a chuckle out of was his evolving relationship with Ned, the insurance salesman. And, you know, it starts off with him being very obviously repulsed by the guy, and, you know, kind of like Pepe Le Pew and the cat. There's this revulsion and struggle to create distance. And then he flip-flops on that and does a very bold statement where he smacks Ned on the jaw and knocks him out. And then on another day, he embraces Ned and, kind of suggests that there may be a romantic theme here that they could explore together, and Ned runs off in revulsion. So it's watching how singular souls in our lives show up on different levels, and then eventually we heal our misconceptions about that people, and finally Ned turns out to be an okay guy, and Bill ends up buying a ton of insurance from him. But it's kind of humorous watching how we go through those processes as it's projected on the screen in this movie, of loving somebody, hating somebody, wanting to escape from somebody, wanting to overwhelm somebody. So we're getting a lot of different roles that we interact with a single person with over multiple lifetimes that are kind of highlighted very brilliantly in Ned, who shows up in the early stages as a significant part of the plot.
To get into lifetime, I would definitely say that in a way we are doing this, and if we actually remembered our lifetimes being really a significant lesson that we are attempting to recognize and to learn, bringing them all together. If it was possible to remember previous lifetimes, and I think it would be almost the same thing. And I'm repeating the same, I don't know, 60, 70 years over again or something. And it's like, I've done this, but by the time you're in it, I've already forgotten my childhood, so it's a much longer day around here, and it's a little harder. But as far as that evolution, if there is reincarnation in that sense, it would be to eventually learn to be in the flow, and being completely in knowledge of the script, and completely allowing that divine being through, that exactly where to be, what to do, and how to say it, and to change everybody's lives just by being there and saying even just that them, oh, this is this person, and they're from this place, and they look at you like, do I know you? Hey, whoa, this is like some divine being here or something.
Yeah, it reminds me, I remember hearing Gloria Watt talk about the experience of being thunk by God. And I think your expression of flow, or your expression of kind of being in that place of egolessness, it is like that. It's that expression where we don't have to worry. I've been kind of hearing this image that it's been coming to me the last month or so, of like letting yourself be a paintbrush in the hand of God.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of really just turning our life over to God, and realizing that I don't know what anything is for. As the workbook says, I do not perceive my own best interests. So how can I make a judgment about anything, right? I mean, every time I'm actually just making up a story. Yeah, well, sure, maybe I think that's best, but how do I really know?
Yeah, that whole thing of acceptance, I think, is a central theme throughout all the different spots within the movie where people are interacting. And Bill Murray ends up doing some really brilliant work as far as coming from a place of superiority and this wild self-evaluation that kind of reminds us of people in the White House and that sort of thing, where there is an exploded sense of self, a sense of self that just is so engulfing that he's not even aware of the fact that people around him are offended or in disagreement with him. And we see that slowly melt. It's like a candle where all of a sudden, as the flame grows within him, the flame of his consciousness, all of a sudden we see the wax pouring down the sides and melting off this shell that he was projecting about his identity. And, at the end of the movie, he wakes up in the arms of Andy McDowell, and they are obviously in a state where they've made a major commitment. And that kind of loops back into a lot of the imagery we get from some of the great Sufi poets about the idea of the beloved, where we may have a specific person that we have given that role in our lives to, in order to go through the process of awakening. But actually the beloved is God in totality, and we're perceiving that or aspiring to perceive that in a specific person. And so within this movie, we see him finally awakening and getting out of the trap of repeating the day over and over again by discovering the beloved in his arms when 6 o'clock in the morning rolls around. And that, I think, is the perfect way to bring the movie into its culmination, because that really is a journey that all of us are on, is to find the beloved within first the exterior world, and then ultimately to discover it within ourselves.
Yeah, it's true. And another theme that of this movie that really intersects with the Course is there's a message, a New Year's message, where Jesus says to Helen, "Make this year different by making it all the same." What is he saying? He's saying, realize that every day is for your awakening. Every day, every moment, every opportunity where you might be upset is a chance for you to choose love and peace and kindness. And I think in Bill Murray's story here, he begins to embrace that, you know, partway through the movie. And then he gets more and more into that. He realizes his whole purpose. You know, he starts learning how to play the piano. He starts learning artistic pursuits. He starts reading philosophy and poetry, not for trying to woo someone, but actually for himself. And you know, I think that is the message, to make this year different by making it all the same. Make this day different by making it all the same. And realize what it's for. It's for us to wake up to our truth. And there's really no other purpose, no matter what seems to be happening on the level of form.
So what would you guys say finally did it? I mean, how did he get out? Was it just timing? Was it just going to be that day anyway? Or was it some divine arrangement? I have my theories. I want to share it after you guys kind of share your ideas about it.
No, for me, it was
Sorry.
For me, it was a discovery of love, not the self-obsession and the egocentric idea of love, but the realization that love is a form of surrender, and you surrender into a relationship that expands you and your beloved. So I think that that was the actual point where he was released, was when he finally surrendered to love, and the awakening occurred.
Yeah, along those lines, I really feel like he graduated, right? That he sort of had to accomplish what he had to accomplish, and it wasn't until he'd finished on a soul level kind of what was set out for him to do that he was able to kind of move forward in time, right, on to February 3rd and past that. So that's I think pretty much similar to what Chris was saying.
Yeah, I think I would come to somewhat of the same conclusion. I just might describe it a little differently, thinking of relating to this, I guess, scripture that says, talks about bringing heaven to earth, and that we're actually attempting to bring heaven to earth in a sense of, well, I mean, we can describe that in so many different ways, but I see it as a reflection of my mind. So everything I see is somehow symbolically representing the existence of what is in the mind of Christ, and what I believe about the world is then perceived as the world, and I'm one in the same, one in it. So then in that discovery and that evolution that he was doing, I see like he was making the change in himself, and then he had to bring even though the change was happening as he was changing his mind, the change was happening around him as well. But he had to act on it, and then it naturally fulfilled. And so within that day, he expanded, made that change of who he was, and his influence on everything. He made that same change with every reflection, every aspect of that world that he saw. So he probably literally, in my theory, touched every single person he saw there in some way, and everything that he saw was a problem, or that kid falling out of a tree, and in that he influenced every last little thing to be in this sort of reflection of the change that occurred within him. And even though it's just symbolically, I feel like it finally came to its conclusion when he just through that day completely won her over with that love, and the whole finding everyone just being love. And then I think on that day he didn't care anymore completely, 100%. Didn't care anymore if it was going to be another Groundhog's Day or not. And there it was, to his surprise. So yeah, that's kind of how my mind grabs onto what happened.
Yeah,
Nice.
he allowed himself to step out of resistance, and that's the only way you can escape from things that are problematic.
That's intense.
So
don't resist the ringing phone, Devin.
yeah, well, it's an 844 number.
Powered by it.
I hope their switchboard implodes, but that's one of the things I've got to work on giving up, is my resistance to these callers who want to fix all of my credit card debt by adding more debt to my credit cards. So it's kind of a odd spiral downwards. The other part of the movie I kind of got a kick out of was him doing this sculpture, this ice sculpture of Andy. And, he captures her face perfectly. And she says, oh, how did you do that? I didn't think you even noticed me. And, he makes that statement that he's seen her face 1,000 times in 1,000 ways. And that I thought was kind of fun too, because how often are we unaware of the fact that people are observing us and, giving us a once over every day that we encounter them. They're always looking for changes, or looking for different variations in expression, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of different subtleties within this movie that, when you look at them more deeply, really have kind of a delightful edge to them, and give the movie a lot of depth that you have to watch it a second or third or fourth time to really pick up on all these things.
Yeah, it's true. Every time I watch it, there's something I had never noticed before. So, yeah, and I think it's like our experience of the Course. How many times have people said, I know I read that page a few times before, but I've never seen it that way, and there's a deeper layer. So, we just keep peeling back these layers, and we go further with it. And I think, yeah, movies can be like that too.
Yeah, it's funny because I often, seeing the reflection of my mind, I see God's communicating with me all the time through everything, and just kind of directing my life. And it's a matter if I'm listening and paying attention. And it's funny because just after Groundhog's Day, my wife and I tend to watch sci-fi shows going to bed lately anyway, and we've been on watching Stargate, and I don't know what season we're on, but I just fall asleep to it. And it just so happens that they went through some place where the two of them are repeating that same 6 hours over and over again. I didn't make it through it. I fell asleep, but it wasn't entirely a shock. But Trina recognized it. She's like, hey, weren't you just watching Groundhog's Day? It's like, no, you were watching Groundhog's Day. And I'm like, yeah, this is my life. It's just keeps reflecting my mind, everything I see. It's really not a surprise. And like I'm telling her, this happens almost every day. It's like Stargate talks about my day. It's kind of it was Star Trek before that, but we got tired of watching all the seasons over and
That is the beauty, though, of the way life works, is that ultimately everything that we experience, every encounter we have, is designed to assist us in the process of awakening. So even though a part of your mind may be screaming out, I can't stand this, this is horrible, I've got to change this is never going to work for me. The truth is, that's a little patch of desert that you have to work your way through until you arrive at a point where you realize that the oasis beyond the desert could not be reached had you not gone through the desert. So, and we see this reflected in a lot of movies and a lot of books, and in just observing the world around us. It's the beauty of knowing that nobody is ever going to be lost, and that nothing actually is wrong. It's all exactly the way it's supposed to be, in order for us to be forced out of our sloth and our laziness, and start struggling to advance and to move forward.
Wait, are you going to force me out of my sloth, Chris? I don't know if I want that.
No, yeah. I'm going to set a crazed groundhog loose on you, and that should inspire you to climb the tree really, really fast.
I knew it was going to be trouble connecting with you, man. You were just waiting to spring this groundhog on me.
Yes, well, groundhogs are very feral. And, that brings up memories of our early childhood when we were somewhat feral and 3 years old, eating mud in the backyard. So it's all part of a bigger plan.
I don't even know what to say anymore.
Well, does anybody, pardon me, does anybody else have any thoughts on Groundhog Day, or should we wind it down? And
well, I was just gonna say something about Truman Show, which I would love to get into next time. I go through it a lot. I do. The weekend that Truman Show came out, I got lost camping, hiking, I guess at the time, and away from the scouts I was with, and I walked through this field of trees with a bunch of knots all over it, and I started thinking I was somehow relating that to cameras and that I was being watched the whole time. And I went from this place of fear into this comfort of knowing that there's these producers and the scripts all written out, and they just want to see what I'm going to do, and that this is all just set up. And I felt like I developed in that decision, in that choice of recognizing the Truman Show. And I still go through it today when I go through that frequency of paranoia. Is like, I'm like turning to my wife. I'm like, they're not paying you enough for this job. And then referring to producers. And I do this often. I'm like, you gotta get this situation going. Anyway, I'm also referencing to the fact that Stargate keeps reflecting to me, and I know at the same time it's just my mind trying to comprehend how I'm relating with God, and how it's all just quite literally one big essence. And everything, even dealing with you and everyone, is just my relationship with God. And that it's all, everybody is the producer, the writer, and all of you know the truth. And, I'm the only one that's questioning it and getting stuck in misinterpretation and perceiving your truth of it as my misinterpretation. I'm seeing you as a body. I'm seeing And so that even that sense of paranoia, I was thinking that, yeah, the producers are after me, and or they're not letting me out. I need to go find the edge of the world. You know, all this stuff that I would love to get into with the Truman Show. It just reflects my mind. It it really does. I know you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds good. So I'm just gonna make a little note here to increase her pay for him to put up with you all this
Yes.
time, Devin.
Well, I'm sure there are going to be lots of different options as we continue to develop this series. And, you know, we've got the Truman Show that's probably going to be coming up very soon. Little Shop of Horrors, which is an amazing, you know, revelation of ACIM principles. And then there's the 13th Floor. There's just so many, and if the viewers have shows in particular, movies in particular, that they are fond of, where they feel like they've experienced insights that really go into that region of being very profound, definitely, you know, give us a list of things that you think we should take a look at and have a dialogue about, and do share the video and share themiraclewithin.org, because it's got a lot of information, a lot of opportunities to see life from a higher and more expanded perspective.
I don't know if you just cut out from me or anything, but I wanted to repeat. Is that themiraclewithin.org?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is that what
that
T
is
at the beginning? The miracles within? Or miracle? Get clear. Let's get clear. It's in the link.
Yeah, yeah, it is the miracle within.org. Yes, the word "the" is at the beginning. Yes.
And you can find everything you want there. It's kind of like Alice's restaurant.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I've been really having a good time doing this with you guys. So I'm looking forward to whatever movie we pick for next.
Sounds good.
Yes, less than a week, hopefully, we'll be doing another broadcast here and looking more deeply into the world of cinema.
All right.
Take
Good
care.
stuff. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.